He ended my career with a stamp, not a conversation. Sit, my boss said, without looking up. This won't take long. My name is Eliza Hart, and I had worked for him long enough to recognize that tone. It meant the decision was already made. The HR manager sat beside him, hands folded too neatly, eyes fixed on the table. No introductions, no preamble. My boss slid a single sheet of paper toward me. Restructuring, he said. Your role no longer fits the direction of the company. I scanned the page. My name was spelled correctly. The reason was vague. The language was sharp. Performance concerns, I said aloud. He smiled. That's standard wording. I've never had a negative review. You're not being judged, he replied. You're being removed. The HR manager finally spoke. Effective immediately. I looked up. Immediately my boss picked up the stamp. He pressed it down hard. Once, then again, as if the sound mattered. Worthless employees don't need explanations, he said, and slid the paper back to me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Don't bother checking, he added. Your access is already disabled. As if on cue, my email refreshed and locked me out. A second later, the HR manager's screen lit up. Staffing update just went out, she said quietly. I felt the room tilt, but I kept my voice steady. So that's it. That's it, my boss said. Security will walk you out. I stood. He didn't. That morning before this room, before the stamp, before the word worthless, I had taken a call I was still trying to understand. A trust attorney. A calm voice. Paperwork verified. Voting control transferred. Effective immediately. He didn't know any of that. As I reached for the termination letter, my boss finally looked at me, not with anger, with relief. You should have known your place, he said. I nodded once and turned toward the door, holding the paper he had signed so confidently. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at RevengeAITA. It explores power, betrayal, and the moment when silence stops being weakness. While the characters and events are imagined, the situations reflect real workplace dynamics and real emotional consequences. The hallway felt quieter than it should have. A security guard waited without meeting my eyes. I folded the termination letter carefully and slipped it into my bag. The stamp ink was still fresh. He believed he had finished with me. I stepped into the elevator, already knowing this was only the beginning. What do you do when you hold power you're not allowed to reveal yet? The attorney didn't offer condolences. She didn't ask about my job. She slid a folder across the table and waited until I opened it. Everything has been verified, she said. The trust has executed. I flipped through documents dense with language most people never read until it's too late. My name appeared again and again, precise and final. You now hold controlling voting rights in the parent company, she continued. Not ownership in the symbolic sense. Control, the word settled slowly. I was terminated this morning, I told her. She didn't react. I assumed that might happen. That surprised me. You assumed? She folded her hands. These transitions tend to expose people. I closed the folder, so I call the board, I correct it. She shook her head once. Clean, final. You do nothing. The silence stretched. There is a quiet period, she explained, until the transfer is formally acknowledged. Any visible interference can be challenged. If that happens, the board can freeze your authority before it ever activates. I leaned back, so I let it stand. For now, I lost my job. You lost a title, she replied. Those are not the same thing. I looked down at the termination letter folded in my bag. They sent an internal notice, labeled me redundant. Her gaze sharpened. And the letter itself. What about it? She reached for the copy I handed over, reading more carefully than anyone had that morning. Her finger paused on a line. This language is aggressive, she said. And the timing is careless. Careless enough to matter. She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, one wrong move, and the board can challenge everything. But mistakes like this create records. She slid the letter back. This doesn't give you permission to act, but it changes what can be examined. I stood to leave. The power sat heavy and unused, like a door I wasn't allowed to open yet. As I stepped outside, I felt the weight of that stamped page again. Not as an ending, as leverage. Why fire someone quietly when you can erase them publicly? The answer didn't come from anger. It came from pattern. I laid the termination letter on my kitchen table and set my notebook beside it. Same table where I had once spread out project forecasts, compliance memos, and risk summaries he never thanked me for. The timing wasn't emotional. It was strategic. 3 weeks earlier, I had flagged a development proposal during a senior review. The numbers were inflated. The assumptions were thin. The approval window was tight. This exposure isn't theoretical. I had told him then. If the zoning appeal fails, we absorb the loss. He hadn't argued. He'd smiled the way people do when they're already planning around you. You don't build power by asking permission. I remembered the room going quiet after that. Not because he was right, but because no one wanted to be next. I had pushed again 2 days later, sent a written objection, requested an independent review. That request triggered a delay clause. A small one, invisible to anyone who didn't understand the structure, but delays cost bonuses. I pulled up the internal calendar on my laptop. The board's incentive committee meeting was scheduled for the end of the week. Performance metrics locked the morning before. My removal created a clean line. No objections, no documented dissent, no compliance officer asking inconvenient questions. He hadn't fired me because I failed. He fired me because I wouldn't look away. I scrolled through old messages. Short, polite, professional. Each one a reminder of where I had stood. Let's revisit this next quarter. Noted. But we're moving forward. Your concerns are on record. On record. That phrase mattered now. I closed the notebook and folded the termination letter once more. The stamp sat squarely over my name. Bold and permanent. He hadn't just erased my role. He had cleared his path. And whatever he was pushing through next, he believed no one was left to slow him down. What if the document meant to erase me couldn't survive legal daylight? My attorney, Mara Collins, read the termination letter without interruption. She didn't react to the stamp or the wording at first. She let the silence stretch long enough to make me uneasy. This wasn't rushed, I said. He planned it. Mara didn't look up. That's obvious. She set the page down and reached for a pen. Tell me exactly when this was signed. Late morning, less than an hour after I was called in. Her pen stopped. During the quiet period, yes. She nodded once, then flipped the page over. That alone is careless. Careless enough to reverse it. Careless enough to trigger scrutiny, she replied. Not the same thing. I exhaled slowly. She tapped the stamp. Next problem, authority. He's my direct supervisor, which gives him recommendation power, she said, not unilateral termination power under the governance rules that apply during a transfer window. She slid her pen down the page. This language here, performance concerns. Failure to align. Organizational drag. My jaw tightened. That's not neutral, she continued. That's reputational harm recorded in an internal HR file. He wanted it documented. Then he documented his own exposure. I leaned forward. Exposure to what Mara met my eyes. A governance review. When terminations intersect with ownership transitions, the board is obligated to examine motive, authority, and impact. I didn't speak. I didn't want to interrupt the momentum. She gathered the pages into a neat stack. This letter doesn't give you permission to act. You still can't intervene directly, but it creates a record, she said. And records invite examination. I picked up the letter. The stamp no longer looked permanent. It looked heavy. People who rely on rules rarely imagine those rules being used against them, Mara added. I slipped the document back into my bag, careful not to crease it. He had signed it with confidence. That confidence had weight now, and it was no longer on his side. What does a room sound like when power quietly changes hands? No one announced why the board was meeting on such short notice. The calendar invitation was vague, mandatory, legal present. I took my seat without greeting anyone. Mara sat 2 chairs away, her folder closed, her expression neutral. Across the table, my former boss leaned back with his arms crossed, confidence intact. Already bored, the board chair cleared his throat. We'll begin with the matter of voting authority. A document appeared on the screen, dense, formal, unforgiving. The transfer has been verified. The chair continued. Effective immediately. Eliza Hart holds controlling voting rights in the parent company. The room didn't react all at once. It never does. Power lands in stages. One director adjusted her glasses. Another stopped taking notes. Someone exhaled sharply and didn't bother hiding it. My former boss leaned forward. That can't be correct. Mara spoke without looking at him. It is. He turned to me then. Really looked for the first time that week. The calculation came fast, too fast. The version of me he had erased no longer fit the room. "You knew," he said quietly. "I followed the rules," I replied. The chair tapped the table once. "This is not a discussion. This is a confirmation." Silence again. Thicker this time. No one congratulated me. No one smiled. Authority doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with recalibration. The chair continued. "Given the transition, all recent executive actions will be subject to standard review." My former boss straightened. "That won't be necessary." The chair didn't respond to him. He turned to Mara instead. "Council will advise on scope." Mara nodded. "We will." That was it. No speech, no acknowledgement beyond procedure. My name remained on the screen for another moment before the slide changed. As the meeting adjourned, people stood without ceremony. Conversations started and stopped around me, careful now, measured. My former boss lingered, searching my face for something he could still use. There was nothing left to offer. Power had settled, quietly, officially, and the way his jaw tightened told me he already knew this wasn't finished. What do desperate people do when they lose control of facts? I learned the answer before anyone spoke to me directly. Mara forwarded the first article without comment. A trade blog I recognized. Anonymous sources. Concerned insiders. The headline didn't mention my name, but it didn't need to. Leadership transition raises stability concerns. I scrolled slowly. Emotionally driven decisions. Unclear qualifications. Boardroom uncertainty following a sudden inheritance. The language was careful, crafted to sound responsible, designed to plant doubt without leaving fingerprints. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. "Settle quietly, or I'll make this ugly." No greeting, no signature. He never needed one. Mara watched my face as I set the phone down. "He's trying to control the narrative. He always did." I replied. Another alert appeared. An internal email this time. Someone had forwarded it to half the company. Temporary leadership measures pending further clarity. Pending clarity. As if the clarity hadn't already been documented, voted on, and entered into record. Mara shook her head. "This is reckless. He thinks speed will save him." "And fear," she added. A pause settled between us. "You could respond," she said. A statement, reassurance, something measured. I looked at the phone again, at the text waiting for an answer. "No," I said. "That's what he wants." Silence unnerves people who are used to controlling noise. Another message came through the minutes later. "I know where the weak spots are. Don't force me to use them." I handed the phone to Mara. She read it once, then again. "This crosses a line," she said. "It confirms one." I replied. I didn't block the number. I didn't reply. I let the screen go dark. By the end of the day, the story had spread far enough to make people nervous. Not panicked. Nervous. The kind of unease that turns into questions. Mara closed her folder. "Threats like that don't come from confidence. They come from history," I said. She nodded. "And history leaves records." I picked up the termination letter from my desk drawer and set it beside the phone. He was trying to bury me in noise. He didn't realize he had just pointed us toward the past he was most afraid to open. What happens when numbers start answering questions people avoid? "The threshold is met," Mara said, "for cause." That was all it took. The authorization moved quickly after that. Quietly, no announcement, no memo. Access logs sealed. Systems mirrored. The kind of work that happens without ceremony because ceremony would invite interference. I sat across from Daniel Reyes, a forensic analyst brought in under outside counsel. He didn't waste time with reassurances. "We're not looking for intent," he said, sliding a preliminary report toward me. "We're looking for consistency." The first inconsistency appeared on the third page. "These figures," he continued, tapping the column. "Reported occupancy versus deposited revenue. They don't reconcile. By how much enough to matter?" Mara leaned in. "Patterned." "Yes," Daniel replied. Quarter after quarter. The door opened before anyone could speak again. A young woman stepped in, breath shallow, clutching a small drive in her hand. I recognized her from Communications Junior. Careful, usually invisible. "I was told to bring this if anything happened," she said. "He said it was insurance." Mara took the drive, against what she swallowed, against being blamed. Daniel connected it to a clean terminal. Emails populated the screen, drafts, directives, messaging strategies that never went public. And this, Daniel said, opening another folder. Policy revisions. My eyes caught on a familiar heading. Zero tolerance data integrity clause. Mara froze. That clause was pushed through aggressively. Daniel nodded. Authored and approved by the same executive. I didn't need to ask who. He insisted it apply retroactively, Daniel added. To everyone. The room settled into a new kind of silence. Not anticipation, recognition. The junior staffer stood rigid. Am I in trouble? No, Mara said. You're a witness. Daniel closed the file. This changes the scope. I looked at the screen one last time. The rule, the signatures, the certainty behind them. He hadn't just trusted the system. He had built it to protect himself. And that confidence was about to become the only thing left holding him in place. What do you say when your own rules are read back to you? My former boss arrived with confidence sharpened into something brittle. His attorney followed, briefcase in hand, already prepared to negotiate. Let's be efficient, he said, taking his seat. I'm willing to walk away quietly. Mara didn't respond. Neither did the board. He continued anyway. $6 million in severance, immediate vesting of deferred compensation, a non-disparagement agreement on both sides. I pressed the remote. The screen behind me came alive. Numbers, tables, timestamps. Daniel's voice came through the speaker. Calm, exact. These figures represent reported occupancy rates across 12 consecutive quarters. My former boss leaned forward. That data is internal. So is the discrepancy, Daniel replied. Reported occupancy averaged 98%. Actual deposited revenue aligns with 82%. A pause. That's a clerical issue, my former boss said. Creative accounting. Everyone understands stop, his attorney said quietly. All eyes shifted. The attorney closed the briefcase, slowly, deliberately. I need a moment with my client. There's no need, Mara said. She slid a document across the table. You may want to read the clause first. My former boss didn't touch it. His attorney did. The silence stretched. The attorney's jaw tightened. Then he stood. I'm withdrawing. He said, effective immediately. What my former boss looked up, sharp and startled. You authored this policy, Mara said, finally addressing him directly. Zero tolerance data integrity, retroactive, for cause termination. I spoke then, not loudly, not with satisfaction. You insisted it protect the company from people like you. He stared at the screen again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves. The board chair cleared his throat. Termination for cause is approved. No vote count was read aloud. No objections followed. Security stepped in without instruction. My former boss stood slowly, not angry, not pleading, just hollow. He looked at me one last time, searching for something that no longer existed. The door closed behind him. The screen went dark, and for the first time since the stamp hit paper, the system spoke louder than he ever had. Is losing everything louder or quieter than winning the vote didn't echo. It didn't need to. Termination for cause, the chair said. Already moving on to the next agenda item. Effective immediately. No one asked about severance. No one mentioned options or transition statements. The silence answered those questions faster than words ever could. My former boss remained seated for a moment, as if waiting for a correction that wasn't coming. There will be no public comment. The chair added. Legal will handle disclosures. His mouth opened, closed again. Mara gathered her papers. Your access is revoked as of now. Security stepped forward, not rushed, not aggressive. Routine. He stood. Jacket still buttoned, posture careful. This isn't how it ends, he said, voice low, trying to leave something behind. No one responded. At the door. He paused, looked back at the table, at the screen that no longer showed his numbers. At me. You're making a mistake, he said. I didn't rise. I didn't answer. The door closed with a soft, final sound. The meeting continued without him. Afterward, directors filtered out in pairs, then alone. No congratulations. No sideways glances. Just recalibration. One of them stopped beside my chair. You'll appoint an interim, not today, I replied. He nodded, accepting the answer without challenge. In the hallway, Mara walked beside me. They'll expect an announcement. They'll get one, I said. About standards, not replacements. She studied me for a beat. You don't want his role. I don't want his habits. We reached the elevator, the doors opened. Empty. As we stepped inside, my phone vibrated. An alert from internal systems. One account deactivated, then another. His name disappearing in stages. The doors closed. I watched the floor numbers change, steady and indifferent. I hadn't come to take his place. I had come to make sure no one like him ever felt that secure again. What do you remove when you don't need revenge anymore? I didn't call a meeting. I didn't ask for permission. I emailed human resources with Mara copied. Remove the termination stamp from all active and archived HR workflows. I wrote, effective immediately. A few minutes later, the HR director appeared in my doorway. Careful, measured. That stamp has been in use for years. I know, I replied. That's why it needs to go. She hesitated. It was meant to standardize process. It was used to end conversations. I said, those are not the same thing. She nodded once. I'll issue the update. That was it. No announcement, no memo framed as a victory, just a system quietly corrected. Later that afternoon, I met with the senior leadership team, not to introduce myself, not to explain the past. We are changing how authority is exercised, I said. No decisions made in isolation, no language that erases people to protect outcomes. One of them shifted in his chair. And if someone disagrees, then it's documented, I replied, and addressed, not buried. No one argued. After they left, I sat alone for a moment, the room finally still. I took the termination letter from my bag. The ink had faded slightly. The stamp looked smaller than it had before. It never defined my value. It only revealed his. I tore the page once, then again, slow, deliberate. Dropped the pieces into the shredder and watched them disappear. I didn't take his office. I didn't take his title. I kept my name. Before I shut down my computer for the night, I typed one final note to myself and saved it where no one else would see it. Power that relies on humiliation is fragile. Authority that fears transparency cannot last. And no one who needs to silence you was ever qualified to measure your worth. I stood, turned off the light, and walked out knowing the stamp was gone. So was the need to prove anything to anyone.